Go. Oh, an error occurred. Let's see what happened. Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Yogesh Chavda. I'm the founder of Y2S Consulting. We are a consultancy that helps brands operate in stigmatized industries, and we also talk a lot about AI and marketing. I am absolutely delighted today to have Jennifer Mancusi, who's the co-founder and CEO of GrowGetter, which is a growth marketing agency. So, Jen, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Likewise, likewise. I saw your podcast a few weeks ago and I was so like blown away by it. I was like, I have to have you join us because you have a lot of good things to talk about in the context of marketing. So
Thank you.
that's why I was when you said yes, I was like ecstatic. So
Amazing. Amazing. Well, I'm ecstatic to be invited. So thank you so much.
fantastic. So let's start first by maybe if you could just give spend a minute just giving a bit of background about yourself. Tell us who you are. Tell us how you got into this space, and tell us about your agency in terms of why did you go down this path. Just curious to hear about that.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been a marketer from the beginning. I've been on both B2C and B2B sides of marketing,
Mhm,
but mostly B2B for the last 15 years or so. And throughout that time, also really kind of sticking within the insights space.
mhm,
So I worked for companies like Taluna and Box Pop Me. And one thing that I think, we noticed in the insight space specifically, I think there was many years or even decades where you like companies could grow and scale without investing in marketing, and the landscape is very different today.
mhm,
And we just felt like there was a big need for companies in the space for growth marketing partner.
mhm.
And so we created the agency GrowGetter last year,
Okay.
and yeah, having a lot of fun with that.
Amazing, amazing. So, one of the things, what attracted me to your podcast, and that's the reason. Obviously, we know we're here together today is that you talked a lot about what trends you're seeing this year. Now, obviously, like 2 months of the year are already over, and so much has already happened in 2 months of this year, right? So, tell me a little bit about what are you seeing in the marketplace from a marketing perspective in terms of trends. Let's just start with that general question and see where we go from there. So
Yeah. So I think, some of the things that are really like maybe if they aren't trending yet, they need to be right
yeah,
now
yeah.
is, better personalization and more relevant
Hmm.
approaches to marketing and content.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's a big one. Like really we know so much about the people we're trying to reach, whether we're on the B2C side or B2B side of marketing. We have all this data about the people that we're trying to communicate with, yet we communicate with them as if they're all different or as if they're all the same.
Hmm.
And so I think that personalization piece in marketing is really critical right now. We are seeing that happen more and more,
Hmm.
where companies are doing a better job segmenting and making sure that they're communicating with their those segments in an appropriate way.
Hmm.
But I think we need to see a little bit more of that. An account-based strategy is a huge trend, and I don't even know if I would call it a trend. It's been, sort of around for many years, but I think it's growing and continues to grow as people are forced to be more efficient with their marketing spend. And so a really targeted strategy, it kind of in some ways aligns a little bit with the personalization as well,
Hmm.
making sure that you're marketing to specific target accounts or maybe growth accounts. We can talk about that at some point too,
Hmm.
probably. But I think an account-based strategy is a big trend as well. And then lastly, and this is something I think I talked about in that episode that you're referencing, but original content, human generated content, like shockingly is a trend at the moment because it's sort of the antithesis of all of this AI stuff that's happening in the space. So there's this need for really, truly original content in marketing in order to sort of outshine those that are just kind of leveraging technology with maybe less thought and consideration.
Makes sense. So a couple of questions, and it's interesting because part of my work also is to teach classes at the University of South Carolina. And in fact, we
Mm,
were just in a conversation about this very question yesterday in one of my classes,
yeah.
where we were talking about demand generation versus demand creation.
Mm.
And are the two the same? Are they different in your world? How do you see them? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I would even take it a step further and go backwards where to lead generation. I mean, that was
Mhm.
always the focus for marketing for the longest time. We need to
Yeah.
generate leads. And now it's more about generating demand, creating demand. I think what the big difference for me is the kind of rising trend or focus on and emphasis on brand. So I think
Mhm.
when you're generating leads or generating demand,
Mhm.
you're really just talking about like how are we getting more people to raise their hand to want to work with us.
Yeah.
And there's this sort of like, we can't invest in brand, that's not as important. But I think the demand creation is about creating an attractive brand that will then drive demand for you. So it's kind of like the intersection of demand and brand together,
Mhm.
as opposed to just drive leads, drive leads, drive leads,
Mhm.
which I think a lot of companies, historically, not so much today. I think there is more of an emphasis on the importance of brand. Finally,
Yeah.
uh, there was a period of time where it was like, just drive the leads, cheapest leads possible, spend the money, scale that channel.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think that's really the difference. And I think that's a really good thing.
So, how would you then connect what you started off by saying first, which is about personalization,
Mm,
with this concept of demand generation and demand creation, which is all about the brand? Uh,
hmm.
are you seeing examples, or what are you seeing in that space that makes you say, yeah, going back to the brand is a good thing, but then
Yeah.
how do we make it personalized to the account is also a good thing, because the two are, they both have to coexist together in some way, right? So
They do. I think it's about the experience that you're creating. And
right.
I think that, like, I heard somebody say this at a marketing conference years ago, like customer experience is the new marketing, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's true. Like the experience that customers have when they're working with you is such a critical marketing channel. But
Yeah.
now there's this sort of earlier in the funnel, you're not a customer yet. You still have to have an experience with that brand. And
Mhm.
what is that experience that you're having? Are you having an experience that feels like, this brand cares about me or understands me in some way? They're
Mhm.
sharing things that are relevant to me. And I'm not talking about like, retargeting.
Yeah.
You've done a Google search for, bicycle, and now I'm getting bicycle ads. Like that's old and been done, right? But some
Yeah.
of it's even simpler than that. It's like, you know, sending mass emails with the wrong, you got bad data in your CRM, so you're sending the wrong name.
Mhm.
Hi Mark, when I'm sending an email to you. Like that is an experience. I've just had an experience with your brand.
Yeah.
And that's not even a really complex example of personalization. It's a really simple one. And so I think thinking about the experience that you're creating at the top of the funnel, not just the customer experience,
Mhm.
is, where that sort of personalization and brand intersects a little bit.
Amazing, amazing. So you mentioned AI as well. So now, let's just kind of like bring that in a little bit. So, what are you seeing right now in the market when it comes to AI and in personalization and in the context of this conversation?
Yeah, so I think AI, it's not new, right? I think it's the adoption is skyrocketing.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's more accessible and a lot of different tools and technologies, and I think the widespread use is actually going to create this sort of divide between the good marketing and the bad marketing.
Hmm.
Right. I think that we're seeing a lot of use of AI as like a shortcut, right?
Hmm.
Let's
Mhm.
just have AI write an article or have AI do this for me.
Mhm.
And I think this is why the original content and the personalization is so important, because you've got this kind of like massive volume of AI generated content that's existing out there. So the way to set yourself apart is to actually have something that's unique and original and useful and personalized. And that can't be done
Mhm.
from just pop this into a chat GPT or another platform and see what it spits out, copy paste. I think also it's really easy. It's getting easier, at least for me, to tell the difference between content that is AI generated and not.
Oh,
So,
that's fascinating because there has been so many articles coming up right now saying, "Oh, it's hard to detect what's human and what's not," and you know, uh, so many people are worried about this as an issue. So tell me a little bit about how are you able to detect that? I'm curious.
well, I feel like it's like some of the wording that gets used, like any article that starts off with like in today's landscape, this is it like, they sort of set up they set up the topic in the way that you used to when you were writing a sort of middle school paper when you were learning how to write, right? Like that's the format.
Yeah.
And so I spot it from a mile away when I read an
Mhm.
article that says, I'm like, this is AI generated, right? Or it's just the tone is off when you've got it's linked to the brand experience. You have a certain experience with a brand. Maybe you've been a customer or a follower for a long time. There's a specific tone of voice. It's hard for AI to recreate that without some human involvement.
Yeah.
So I'm not anti AI. I'm actually super pro AI. I use it in my day to day. My team uses it, but we use it in a really specific way. And it has a lot of human intervention.
Yeah.
And that comes at every stage of using it. So, if we're looking to, sometimes it's a good way to like undo a creative block. Give me
Mhm.
some ideas. I want to talk about this. I want to write about this. Where should I go with it? So it's a good way to spark ideas. It's also a good way to sort of reformat content that already exists.
Mhm.
So if you've written something and you've written it as an email and you want it to be a blog article, it's a good way to kind of restructure some things.
Mhm.
So or if you're looking to create something from scratch, have some really, really specific prompts so that it's not just write an article about this, because that's not going to be unique. It's not going to be original. It's not going to be personalized.
Right.
I think the prompting is really important and then the editing is really important. So that's why I say like using AI as a shortcut, it's not the approach, but there are a lot of benefits to using it as long as you are, you know, uh, sort of leveraging it in a really human way, and making it your own. Add in your own stories and anecdotes, make it unique, give it that like if you're a marketer and you're writing something, you've got all this experience that AI doesn't have.
Mhm.
Incorporating your own personal experience or what you know about your audience. Maybe it's
Mhm.
a segment, maybe it's an individual, but really personalizing it and making it relevant. Those are the ways that AI can be really powerful.
And in an odd way, though, that is actually a trend, right? Because or the emergence of a trend. Because I would, if I look back to last year when AI, made its big splash, and everybody was playing, everyone was experimenting. There was a lot of test and learns happening. I think this year I'm at least sensing that there's a bit more scaling happening, like you're describing, with email or other things that are that could be happening. But to your point, I think that the trend part of it is really that humanize it, so that way it becomes something that belongs to you, right? So as to your brand, basically, as opposed to just something that is generic, and it just feels a watered down version of something just to put something out there, as opposed to making it really unique and distinct for your content, basically, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, like, some of the reasons why people were using it in that way, like, things like SEO, right? I just need
Yeah.
content on this topic for
Mhm.
SEO purposes. Well, the Google algorithm is a lot smarter now.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of new algorithm releases last year, sort of post the AI explosion, that make it really hard for like pure AI generated content to rank for SEO. So it's like that's no longer a good approach. And you're right. I think that's the trend is this sort of like hybrid um, usage of AI. And I think what people really need to do is experiment with it, play with it, use it, as much as you possibly can, because that's the only way you can kind of see what it's good for and what it's not.
Yeah.
Um, but don't just like use it
Mhm.
and like dump it out there, but also don't not use it. I hear a lot of people like, I'm just waiting for AI to get better or to
Mhm.
get something, right?
Mhm.
Don't
Mhm.
wait. You need to use it and play with it and learn it,
Mhm.
because otherwise you're going to find yourself falling behind.
Absolutely, and the pace of change is so dramatic,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Even if you look at just the last couple of weeks with the announcement of, from even OpenAI around like Sora, the new video capability that they're introducing, everyone's curious as to what that's going to look like. That's one part. On the other hand, they're also announcing that the plugins are going away from ChatGPT. So, you know, with such a dramatic amount of change happening, it's going to affect, I think, everybody. So if you just wait, you are going to get left behind. To your point, I totally agree with you. Um, at your agency, as you're working with your clients, are you seeing a lot of demand from them in terms of saying, "Hey, are they asking you like, are you using AI?" Or what kind of conversations do you get into, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So people aren't like specifically asking us to use AI.
Yeah.
We have a few different conversations that happen often. We have,
Mhm.
whether it's with clients or with just people in our network,
Yeah.
or people that we're talking to.
Mhm.
Um, the one is, the sort of how should I be using AI, or how are you using AI? And so we
Mhm.
talk about, things like I said, restructuring content,
Mhm.
actually, like, adjusting for tone or for reading level
Yeah.
is another way that we use it. So
Mhm.
sometimes we get really complex. Actually, here's a great example. Did this a couple of weeks ago. I had a really technical paper from a client that we wanted to make it more, more broadly applicable to
Mhm.
be on this very like specific technical audience. So it was a great way to say, hey, let's see if we can put this in layman's terms, and then again, it requires a lot of editing from there. So there's that conversation, like, how are we using it? How should we be using it?
Yeah.
We're actually building up right now a library of prompts,
Hmm.
that people can use for different things, just from our own experience of, we have to sometimes tell AI not to make things up, right?
Yeah.
You might not realize it's done it, right? You like, it
Mhm.
spits out some content for you and you're like, hey, where did you get this stat from? And it will actually say to you, oh, sorry, I made that
Mhm.
up.
Yep.
So, you really have to play with it to learn that stuff. So that's the one conversation. The other conversation I have a lot is, well, oh, it's easy. I just have AI create it for me.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that is an education that we're having this conversation all the time of like, please don't just let AI generate content for you.
Mhm.
Take something original that you created and you wrote. It
Mhm.
doesn't even have to be writing. So video, we're having this conversation today, like taking a transcript from this video. This conversation is
Mhm.
original content, right?
Right.
This,
Yeah.
your thoughts and my thoughts, and we're having a chat. This is original content. Turning this into something written is something that AI can help us do. We've
Mhm.
created the original content already. So
Right.
that's usually like what I recommend to people.
Mm.
But yeah, it's one of those two conversations. It's how do I use it, or us sort of educating, like, please don't just use it.
I totally get that. So you mentioned video. I was curious. Are you seeing like original content in a video podcasting approach? Is that something that you're seeing more of nowadays, or not?
We would like to. We're definitely like, we're big proponents of video content in any form. And we do have some clients who are like, this is an objective for 2024. We need more video in
Yeah.
some way, which I love. I think that's a great way to connect with your audience,
Hmm.
and sort of make it a little bit more human. People don't want to buy, you know, pieces of technology that have no people behind them. They want to know who they're buying from and connect
Hmm.
with them. So I think video is a great way to do that. In terms of the podcasting piece, I've been live streaming a podcast for about 3 years now.
Okay.
This new podcast is about a year old.
Hmm.
And it's amazing to me how many people are still not live streaming. It's such a great way to, like first connect, right, with people beyond just the audio. The audio is still useful, of course. You can repurpose that afterwards. But also, I see people give up on a podcast strategy too early because it's hard to build a podcast audience from scratch.
Yeah.
So, if you live stream your podcast, you're leveraging an audience that you already have built. If you've
Mhm.
got a network on LinkedIn, you've got a network on Twitter or on YouTube, and it just gives people more opportunities to engage with your content and then follow your podcast and listen to you on Spotify or Apple or something. So,
Yeah.
huge fan of live streaming and video. I think there's so many benefits, and it's so easy to do. But I don't know. I think maybe there's a bit of fear sometimes of like being live.
Yes. Well, look, I know I make no bones about this, and I talk about this very publicly. I started live streaming since last summer, right? And if you look at my first 5 or 6 live shows that I did, they're all on LinkedIn right now on the feature section. Just click more, and you'll see all of them, right? You can literally see the progression in terms of how I've made incremental changes. And people will say, "Oh yeah, of course, and that's happening." But for me, these were like big changes in terms of overcoming my own fears of doing this kind of, for example, right? This year I started, for example, I actually bought the a subscription to StreamYard, which is that was a first for me. I was doing everything else for free before, but now I have my own logo. I have now the ability to actually like save the video, and I can actually create shorts now from that.
Amazing,
All
yeah.
these things, it wouldn't have happened if I had not pushed myself in the first place to do this at all. So I totally agree with you. You have to do it, right?
Yeah.
And overcome that fear factor, basically, which is again very human. But if you don't take that first step, you're not going to take the second step, right? So
So true. It's so true. Christoph, our content director, always says this, like, nothing's going to happen if we don't publish it. And I mean,
yep.
replace it with the video, the episode, the blog article, right? Like nothing is going to perform if you don't put it out there. And so just try it, experiment, play with it. And, you'll be surprised to what works and what doesn't. I have been.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I totally get that. So tell me, as you're looking, to the rest of the year, are there any inklings that you're getting in terms of new disruptions that may be coming down in the next few months? What do you think they could be? Or I know I'm asking you to speculate. I get that, and nobody wants to predict. So that's why I'm going to use the word speculate, so that we are not getting ourselves tied into a situation.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if it's much speculation. Honestly, I do think that we're in the middle of a major data disruption from
Mhm.
marketing perspective. I mean, yes, AI, of course, and all the
Yeah.
digital transformation and technology advances, things are changing so rapidly, like you mentioned, but
Yeah.
there's data privacy and data regulations are coming in kind of fast and hot at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think they're probably the biggest disruptors of 2024, and they're already happening. We're obviously like sort of years past the launch of GDPR and CCPA stuff, but like
Mhm.
those regulations continue to evolve. There were just new spam regulations released in February by Google and Yahoo for
Mhm.
how you treat your email database. That's going to have a really big impact on people who are not being personalized, who are just blasting their whole database with not relevant content. So that's going to be a huge disruption if you're not following the best practices, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of companies aren't. They're just, like I said, blasting sales content to their entire database, whereas you're gonna be better off if you are sending more relevant content to your database. But those spam regulations, if you're not up to speed on them, I would highly recommend looking into what they
Yeah.
mean for you and making sure your email servers are authenticated, making sure you're sending personalized relevant content. Otherwise you're going to be in trouble. As soon as you get those spam percentages over a certain point, it's going to be really difficult to recover from that. Also, all the like cookieless web browsing and app usage, like that's really tough for marketers who are really reliant on data, which
Yeah.
everybody should be. So I think those data regulations and changes are the big disruptors at the moment, because it's going to be, it's not it's not a tactic shift, which a lot of disruptions are shifts in tactics. These are shifts in mindset of how companies think about marketing, about how marketers think about success, and
Mhm.
how all of that is measured. So I think that's the biggest change right now that, everybody needs to stay on top of.
You raised some amazing questions and points here. So I want to just like break it down a little bit. So for somebody who is not familiar with the regulations, for example, like in fact, I wasn't aware of it until literally somebody literally sent me an email yesterday
Oh my
asking me
gosh.
that question, and I was like, "What is this all about?" I had no idea. So I'm having to also educate myself. So could you offer maybe a few tips in terms of for someone who's, let's say, one or two steps removed from all these things that are going on, how can they get informed about these things? Where would they
Sure.
look for information? What should they do?
Sure. So I think, I mean, if you Google it, you'll find information about it. If you've got a CRM that you are sending emails to your database through, they should have some resources for you to leverage. Like, for example, we're HubSpot partners. A lot of our clients are on HubSpot. We've been working really closely with HubSpot and with our
Hmm.
with our partners over there to stay on top of these regulations, because some of it is content related, but some of it is tech related.
Yeah.
So having the right kind of authentication for your email servers and your DNS records is
Hmm.
is really important. So working in collaboration with your CRM partners
Hmm.
is really important. And really the long and the short of it is Google and Yahoo are trying to protect their users from spam. So
Yeah.
there's the DNS records, the technical side of things. So making sure that that is all in line is number one, because they're going to flag emails that are coming from unauthenticated places. So that's the one area you want to look at, and then the other area is the content itself. Now, this is where it's a little bit tricky, and it's kind of like a wait and see how this is going to play out. But essentially, if you are sending emails that get over a certain percentage of spam complaints, then your whole DNS is going to get flagged and you're going to have trouble recovering from that. So the tricky part of that is there's nothing stopping people from marking you as spam.
Hmm.
I could send you an email saying, "Hey, great live streaming with you today. I'm so glad we got this conversation, right? I hope to talk to you again soon." And you could mark that as spam. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. So,
Hmm.
but you have a better chance of not getting flagged as spam if you actually are being personalized and relevant to the person that you're reaching out to. So it's unlikely people are going to be in mass volumes marking you as spam when you are sending more relevant content to them. So that's the part that's sort of a wait and see. Let's see how this plays out. The bigger your database, I think the more personalized and segmented you need to be.
Hmm.
The smaller databases will probably uh, be okay, I'm speculating.
Yeah.
But again, this is new. This just happened the month of February. So
Right.
yeah, we've got to keep an eye on it and see how it plays out. And I'm sure things will change as we go.
Absolutely. And so that's one. You mentioned the cookieless futures as well, right? So that's the other one. That's a big one. This has been, been conversations for at least like 2 or 3 years, if not longer. But it feels like this year is actually happening now. It seems like, right?
It is happening, and it's going to continue to happen. It's like,
Hmm.
things are getting rolled out in phases. I mean, you've already noticed maybe over the last 12 months or longer, like when you're on your phone and you download a new app, you can ask it not to track
Yeah.
your behavior and things like that. So this sort of cookieless browsing and cookieless app usage, it's going to diminish your numbers if you're a marketer looking to see what performs. So I want to see how my ads perform, or how my social media organic content performs, or whatever. You're only going to get a subset of the audience that's in that data.
Hmm.
So that makes attribution modeling tricky.
Yeah.
But I think that the key to that is to stay data driven without every single data point. So it requires a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of, like, my favorite approach is implied attribution,
Hmm.
which is just look at, it requires human intervention. You have to look at what maybe a week or a day, or like spikes in your performance, in your organic performance, in your direct traffic to your website or
Mhm.
something. And then what were you doing around that time? What was the brand talking about? What were people in the business talking about that caused those spikes that maybe weren't getting tracked? And that's a great way to overcome that. I think the trick to that, though, is taking the rest of the business on that journey with you, because otherwise you're going to have a CEO or a sales leader or a board who's looking for that attribution metric that you no longer have, right?
Yes. Yes.
So that alignment internally is so critical as marketing shifts to make sure that, everybody's aligned to shared metrics and shared success.
Well, and that's a huge issue already, right? Because a lot of marketeers face this issue of not being able to justify their ROI for the investments they're making in marketing. And now this has just made it like 10 times harder, right? In a way, because you don't have the attribution anymore. So, and I don't think there's a resolution on this particular point from at least what I've seen in the public domain. Maybe you're seeing things that I'm not seeing, but is that a fair statement, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard. It is definitely hard for
Yeah.
marketers to justify the work that they're doing, which is, and I see a lot of companies that are misaligned across groups. Um,
Hmm.
and that rift is really damaging to a business and to a marketing team and a sales team and a customer success team, right? Like, and a
Yeah.
product team. That alignment is so key. And so I think, like, when you're thinking about attribution modeling, like, to get out of the mindset of like, where did this like revenue come from a, ownership perspective? Like, you want to see where revenue is coming from a strategic perspective, because you want more of it, right?
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
the goal of the attribution modeling, is like, oh, we're getting all this really efficient revenue from this channel. Let's invest more resource in that. That's the
Mhm.
goal of that, as opposed to, which what I think has happened historically and continues to happen, is the marketing drove that revenue. No, sales drove that revenue.
Yeah.
No, this is
Mhm.
where it came from. And we have to get out of that mindset, because otherwise nobody wins. And so I think that that's where, like, an adoption of a shared metric is really important.
Mhm.
So we're in agreement. You and I are in agreement that our goal is X, and
Yeah.
we are going to report on that together. So if you've
Mhm.
got two teams reporting on, viewing success differently and reporting on different metrics, then that's always going to be a challenge, and it's going to create this sort of like, who won this revenue is going to create a rift between the teams. um, I think you also need to be like really tightly aligned on, well, who's your ideal customer, what's that
Mhm.
profile, who are we going after, and how do you define a qualified lead, right?
Exactly.
Everybody has to be on the same page about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I touched on it earlier. I think, like, an account based strategy is a growing and emerging trend. This is a great way to get alignment,
Yeah.
because account based, it's not account based marketing. I struggle with that. I don't call it ABM. I don't call it account based marketing. It's an account based strategy.
Mhm.
If you've got one top target account, this is the big one that the company cares about the most. Everybody's got to be aligned on how do we win that client. And
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
doesn't matter where it came from, because everybody's working towards that same shared goal, and everyone's contributing to it in some way. And again, you want to see, where did some of these touch points come into play, and how did we drive conversion through the funnel, so that you can do more of the things that work and less of the things that don't. But it's less about ownership and it's more about strategy at that point.
My gosh, this we could continue talking about this for hours because I could see going down the path of the debate around brand versus performance marketing. That's like a huge topic that's out there already, right? And we've kind of touched upon it already, but there's so
Yeah.
much more you could talk about that. But let me kind of like close it down with a couple more questions. As you think about marketeers, what would be your advice to them for this year? Like, with all the disruption that's happening, with all the change that's happening around us, and experimentation and personalization and all these things, if you had to boil it down to like one or two tips that you'd give people, what would they be?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the first one, and I'll keep this one short, is just the alignment, right? I think
Hmm.
like what we were just talking about, alignment across teams, alignment across your leadership about what success looks like. I think marketers need to think beyond marketing, think about the strategic goals of the business and how you are contributing to that, not
Mhm.
just how are we driving more inexpensive leads, right? Like, what does that mean for the business?
Mhm.
And drawing those connections, you really have to be the one to draw the connection, and appeal to the finance team, appeal to the leadership team. So I think thinking beyond marketing and being a really strategic partner, and creating alignment across the business, that's one. And I think thinking of yourself as a revenue operations leader,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
being very data driven. And again, going back to the challenges with attribution, it doesn't mean that you have to have every data point perfect, but you have to adopt a mindset of measuring so that you can test and learn and be flexible. Because like you said, things change so fast.
Mhm.
So if there's new tactics that are emerging or new trends or new technologies, you need to be able to pivot quickly. So having this sort of foundation of data driven decision making will allow you that flexibility to try new things, see what works. You can't do that if you're not tracking it properly.
Mhm.
So that foundation, I do a mentorship program for my university that I was at, and I'm talking to university marketing students every year, which is super fun.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation recently, and that's exactly what I told her is like like stick with data analytics. The
Mhm.
better you understand how to analyze data, doesn't matter the other stuff, because all the stuff I learned in college about marketing and marketing tactics doesn't exist anymore. Literally does
Exactly.
not exist anymore. I don't do any of it. So if I focus on how to measure success and how to define success, then I can do all the things that emerge. I mean, this is the exciting part of marketing. It's always different and changing, but you have to be you have to be able to know which routes to take and which routes not to take
Mhm.
at when you're kind of playing around with the new stuff that does emerge.
Amazing, amazing, Jennifer. This has been a phenomenal conversation. I can't believe we're already, at 30, at the 37 mark. So it's like amazing how quickly things are going, right? So,
Totally.
thank you so much for this conversation. Really appreciate it. Just for the audience, we'll be back again in 2 weeks. We're going to have Sudarshan Rao, who's the co-founder and CEO of Soxo, which is a company that has a platform that allows you to have your employees basically become your brand advocates. So it's going to be a really interesting and insightful conversation about a new touch point from a marketing perspective, your employees and how they can actually help represent your brand. So if you want to hear that, it's coming up in a couple of weeks on Thursday at the same time. So hopefully you can join us then. So thank you so much, everyone, and see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks. And